Friday the 13th, Carnival of Maniacs, Chapter 13. The cleaning staff removed Miss Jones with such expertise that not even a top forensics team could have found evidence of her murder. Even the scratches on the marble floor, caused by 2 bullets passing through her body, had been smoothed and polished to perfection. Nathaniel Morgus glanced at his fob watch, irritated. It was 8:47 p.m., and the sanitation engineers were only just leaving the room. He made a mental note to have them all sent on a time management course. Suddenly his phone rang to life, and the LCD window displayed the caller he had been waiting all day and night to hear from. "Mrs. Cuyler," he said warmly. "How delightful." Cuyler's voice came through the speaker at such high quality that she could have been standing in the room with him. "You were right," she said. "About what exactly?" A pulsing green light told him that the conversation was being recorded. "I've been suspended," she answered with poker playing at evenness. "I don't suppose you had anything to do with that?" "Heaven forbid!" Morgus blended outrage with bonhomie. "As I said in our meeting, Mrs. Cuyler, the problem resides with your partner, Special Agent Tollison. His sole purpose is to undermine your every move in the Voorhees matter." "I don't accept that," she replied. "Then you should anticipate more obstacles, Miss Cuyler," he said before asking, seemingly as an afterthought, "By the way, where are you?" "So you're saying you had no involvement in my suspension?" she repeated, ignoring his question. "I am not in the habit of lying, Miss Cuyler," he answered curtly. "You have only to request my assistance, and you shall have it." "I get the feeling I've had the pleasure of your assistance already." Morgus stiffened at the obvious slight. "Don't forget the document I gave you," he reminded her. "Whatever you may think of my motives, Miss Cuyler, we have common enemies. Now tell me, what progress have you made?" The line went dead. Cuyler closed her cell and walked back to the Chrysler. Tollison was standing by the passenger door, but even with the moonlight and the twins' neon beams, he failed to see her until she was only a few yards away. "I thought you'd gone," he said, more like a child than a law enforcement officer. "I had to make a call," she answered, returning the phone to her jacket. "And you couldn't do that in front of me?" he accused. "Someone told Landau about my unofficial investigation," she countered flatly. "And you can't get it in your head that I had nothing to do with it." Tollison seemed more hurt than angry. He came round the front of the car and stood toe-to-toe with her in the headlamps. "Cuyler, what do I have to say?" he pleaded. "After all the work we've done together." "You've been with the Bureau, 5 months?" she answered. "Straight from Quantico," he pointed out. "You're the only person who knew," she repeated. "So reverse the situation, Agent Tollison. If you were in my place, what would you do?" Corey rubbed the nascent stubble on his chin. They were rookie and mentor once more, and his senior partner was giving him a chance to shine. After a couple of minutes, however, he reached the only logical solution. "You're right," he sighed. "Go on without me. You've got the car keys." I'll find my own way back. I'll tell Landau you lost me or something." His face drooped in a hound dog expression, and he started to walk back along the way they'd just driven. "Wait," she called. Tollison stopped. "What?" Cuyler leaned into the vehicle and opened the hood. Then she took Tollison's flashlight out of the back seat and shone it into the engine block. "What are you doing?" asked Tollison, not yet daring to rejoin her. "Well," she said, rooting around the oily machinery, "if you're the only person who knew, and you really haven't told anyone, then they must have another way of knowing." "They?" Tollison looked quizzical. "Who are they?" Cuyler stood up. "The people who put this in your car." She held out a small magnetic radio transmitter. Tollison's car had been bugged. There were 2 heads lying on the ground at Harper Field. One of them was raw and sweet, but unfamiliar to Jason. while the other was old and withered and had once been the object of his every devotion. That had been Pamela's mistake. In her fanaticism, she never considered that Jason might recognize her severed head more readily than her persona. She'd been too eager in her desire to be reunited with her son to be mindful of the fact that she looked and sounded exactly like Gloria Sawicki. As Jason was special, it was only natural he might be confused. So Pamela only had herself to blame for losing her head once more. Jason bent down and lifted Glow's corpse off the ground. Then, holding the body in a standing position, he picked up the decayed head of his mother and dunked it on the wet scarlet disaster of Glow's neck. When he was happy that Mommy was good and fixed again, old head on a new body, he let go of the girl's shoulder. Immediately she folded at the knees and the head fell into a pool of bloody mud. Jason stared at the body parts. He turned and looked left at Glow's body. He turned and looked right at Pamela's head. He turned his head left again. He turned his head right again. Alice ran screaming up behind him and smashed the Camp Crystal Lake sign, the same board he had just used to claim dozens of lives, across the back of his head. The wood splintered into pieces, and numbing shock forced Alice to drop what was left of the weapon. But Jason stood his ground completely unfazed. He turned and started to walk towards her. By now, Alice was a picture of violence. Her long dress, her hair, and her pilot's jacket were all thick with the red liquidy of Glow's destruction. And even her skin was now so uniformly crimson as to render her many tattoos invisible. She didn't understand at all what had taken place between Jason and the girl he'd just slaughtered, nor could she work out why Jason seemed so interested in that mummified head. But his intentions now were unmistakable, and Alice ran for her life. What the hell does someone do when forced to flee from the person they need the most? Jason wanted to kill her. She had no way of stopping him. She was terrified of him, and yet she needed him. Fueled by alcohol and desperation, she searched for a weapon or a solution. But everywhere she looked, there was only death. The fire from the trucks, a field full of corpses. Some casualties were still alive and were begging her for help. Her boots felt even heavier as she ran past them. Suddenly, Jason stopped in his tracks and moved back in the direction of the headless girl. Alice laughed. No, she had to get a grip. Laughter was dangerous. She'd been to that dark place once already tonight, and couldn't afford to mess with it again. Because if she surrendered to the laughter, if she caterwauled at Jason playing happy families with decapitated remains, then she knew she would lose herself to madness. "Come back, you bastard!" she screamed, but Jason had only gone to fetch Glow's hunting knife. He was ready to confront her now. The hockey mask, the moonlight shining on the blade, the hatred in his one eye. Alice screamed and ran as fast as she could, the beat of his footsteps never ceasing behind her. No one else in the field seemed to matter anymore. Jason was going to kill her. She tried to hide among the exhibits, but it was futile. No sooner did she take refuge in one of the stands than Jason demolished it. One by one, he plowed through them all. Dracula, Frankenstein, the Wolfman, so much candle wax and firewood in the path of the indomitable maniac. Alice Whitney was learning the hard way that it was impossible to play cat and mouse with the bulldozer. Her lungs ached, her legs were failing, and she was caught in the crossfire of one devastating realization after another. She'd left Judge's laptop in the crawlspace of the Jason exhibit. Her motorhome and all the other carnival trucks were ablaze, leaving her no means of escape, and she was exhausted with not even enough strength left to save her own life. She dropped to her knees and again had to fight back the unbalanced laughter as she found herself staring at the two severed heads. She'd come right back to where she had started from, and if that wasn't the story of her whole goddamn life, nothing was. Suddenly, Jason's pulverizing tread came to a halt. Alice looked over her shoulder and saw him getting ready to hurl the jagged knife deep into her skull. She sniggered, beaten. "Go ahead, you bastard!" Then a cloud passed in front of the moon, and Jason froze. Kyler dropped the tracking device on the ground and made sure it wouldn't be sending any more signals. "Well, now we have our answer," she remarked, administering one final blow to the metal casing. "I'm under covert surveillance." "It was in my car," Tollison corrected her. "It's not even a pool car, it's my own. Why would anyone want to keep tabs on me?" "I'm sorry to disappoint you," said Kyler, "but this is about me. They probably have a listening device somewhere in the office. So when they heard you were coming to pick me up, your car was the obvious choice." Tollison watched as Kyler proceeded to search the rest of the vehicle. "I don't understand," he groaned. "If this gets out, Landau's finished. Even he can't do this. It's totally against Bureau protocol." Kyler lay down on the road and ran the flashlight underneath the vehicle. "It's not just Landau," she said, checking the rear axle. "There's a conspiracy." Tollison kicked the smashed radio transmitter into the underbrush of the surrounding forest. "Oh no, Kyler," he whined. "Please don't. I don't want to hear this. I'm doing my best to understand. The least you can do is treat it seriously." Kyler stood up and dusted herself off. "I am serious," she said, wiping her hands. "An informant warned me I was going to be suspended." "But Kyler, anyone from the office could have told you that. I even warned you myself." Tollison was close to tearing out his hair. "Then how do you explain the tracking device?" she asked defensively. Tollison threw his hands in the air and shrugged. Kyler finished searching the Chrysler's bodywork and now turned her attention to the interior. "I have concrete proof," she said, groping under the steering wheel, "that someone is trying to eradicate all evidence connected to the Voorhees homicides." "I don't suppose there's anything you can show me?" he prompted meekly. She got up out of the car. "I told you Jason killed my mother." "How could I forget?" Kyler took a crumpled sheet of paper out of her pocket and gave it to her partner. Then she held the flashlight up to help him see it. "What's this?" he started. "An old police report?" "Just read it," she answered. A moment later, and Tollison could hardly speak. "Oh, my God," he gasped. "Is it true? They actually opened her grave?" Kyler nodded. He quickly scanned the key points a second time, but the print remained unchanged and unequivocal. 6 years ago, someone had broken into the Wintergreen Cemetery in Wisconsin and had stolen Martha Kyler's body. Harper Field changed from black to silver as the moon was released. Jason aimed his knife a second time, but he was already too late. Alice had observed his immobility, and her natural cunning was filling in the blanks. She remembered Glow calling from the back of the crowd just before Jason came alive. Then she saw how the girl had emerged from the diesel blast holding the severed head in the moonlight. And then there was Jason. He tried to attach the decrepit head to the dead girl's neck. The head! It always came back to the head. Alice took off her leather jacket and threw it down over Pamela's remains. A rush of excitement coursed through her body as Jason was once again paralyzed. This could be the $1,000,000 miracle she'd been hoping for. But first she had to be certain. She bent down and turned up a corner of her coat. Moonlight touched the exposed ground. Slowly she peeled her jacket off the grass and watched as the cold wash inched its way towards the severed head. Until Jason flailed in confusion and snapped his gaze in Alice's direction. Immediately he pounded forwards, but she threw the jacket down again, locking the killer in mid-stride, and the knife fell out of his hands. "Yes!" she roared, and suddenly she was laughing again. Only this time her hysterics were a release of the ultimate anxiety. "You ugly motherfucker!" she howled, and started to dance among the dead. Laughing, singing, whooping like a lottery winner, she sashayed over to Jason, placed both hands on his chest, and pushed him over. "Timber, you fucker! Timber!" Jason toppled and crashed onto the flat of his back. Dozens of corpses were strewn across Harper Field, but Alice felt like she was walking on air. Screw the carnival, screw Freely, screw everyone. She was calling the shots now. Tollison folded up the police report and gave it back to Kyler. "When I woke up this morning," he remarked absently, "I thought today was going to be like any other." "And now?" she asked, putting the document away. "The theft of your mom's body does not prove a conspiracy," he answered quietly. "And it doesn't prove Voorhees is real. I understand how you feel about Jason and your mom, but you can't bring him back just because you need closure." Her head whipped in his direction. "Is that what you think this is?" she snapped. "You think it's my mother who's clouding my judgment? You think I don't mind how many people Jason kills so long as I get a shot at revenge?" Tollison was about to answer when she raised a hand for silence. "What's that?" She frowned, listening. Her partner looked all around. "I don't hear anything." But gradually he became aware of a wall of sirens, and suddenly the dark forest road burst into a Vegas of speeding lights. 1, 2, 3 squad cars, an ambulance, 2 more patrol cars, another ambulance. The emergency convoy came hurtling past Tollison's Chrysler, like an arrow fired by an angel of mercy. "Quick!" shouted Kyler, hurrying round to the driver's seat. "Get in the car!" "But I don't have time for your doubts, Agent Tollison. There's an emergency situation in progress, and we both know who's responsible. Now get in the car or I will leave you." Tollison was still fumbling with his safety belt when the G-force kicked him back in his seat. The tires squealed as Kyler set off in pursuit of the red and blue lights, and Tollison was almost frightened by her determination. It had always annoyed the other showmen that Freely would never park with them, but today Alice could have kissed him for it. Freely's pickup was the only truck that hadn't been touched by the fire. Even better, the idiot always kept a spare set of keys taped under the wheel arch. She clambered up into the 8-foot rear bed and started tossing Kenton's garbage over the side. Tools, boxes, food, even booze. It all had to go. She kept a watchful eye on Jason as she emptied the trailer. But the severed head remained wrapped in her jacket, and it never left her side. When she was done, she jumped down and began to make her way over to the Crystal Lake platform. "Alice, you're alive?" It was Mentor. The big guy was in one piece, but he was horrified to see her soaked with blood. He didn't know that the 2.5 pints had come from Glow. "Mint," Alice drawled, suddenly remembering just how drunk she was. He ran forward and put his arms around her. "My God, are you all right? Are you okay to walk?" "I need something from the truck." She pointed at the open door. "I'll go get it for you. You just wait here." He turned and went over to the cab. Behind him, Alice quietly picked up a spade she'd thrown down earlier. Then she tipped up to Mentor and bashed him on the back of the head. What are you doing?" he cried, horrified. He tried to grab her, but she leapt out of his way and swung the flat of the spade into his face. Mentor fell onto his knees and tried to brace his thighs so that he could get up again. But Alice stood over him and beat him around the head until he was senseless. One final blow and he was out cold. "Sorry, Mint." She dropped the spade on the ground and ran across to the mangled ruin of Crystal Lake. Sparks and Vincenzo looked awful, but what did she care? She crawled under the boat dock, grabbed the travel bag with the computer, and struggled back out to begin the most difficult task of them all, dragging Jason's body to the pickup truck. The last time she and her father had tried to lift the monster, the strain had been unbearable. But now Alice was amazed to find that moving him was almost too easy. She didn't know if it was alcohol, adrenaline, or fate, but she just hooked her hands under his shoulders and pulled him backwards along the ground. The hardest part was getting him up on the bed, and even that succumbed to her determination. Just touching the bastard made her want to throw up, but she was a desperate woman. Quickly, she stuffed the severed head in the travel bag and dropped the bag next to Jason in the back of the truck. Then she locked the gate and took one last look at the carnival. It was a flaming, bleeding scene of mass murder. Mentor was out cold, and her father was dead. Suddenly, she could hear sirens. The police were coming. Shit! She ran into the truck and turned the ignition. There was plenty of gas in the tank, But how could she get away if the road was filled with cops? Suddenly, she remembered the dirt tracks on the far side of the field. It ran up into the surrounding hills and looked a bitch to drive, especially at night. But what choice did she currently have? If the police caught her, they'd see Jason and the severed head. They'd find out Alice was with the carnival, and then she'd spend the rest of her life answering questions. No, she was too close to give up now. Jason was going to make her filthy rich, and she couldn't let anybody prevent that from happening. Not even the authorities. She shifted the truck into gear and rolled forward. Some of the bodies she bumped over were still alive before they were crushed under her wheels. "Better hurry, dear. They're coming for you." Alice shook her head. She guessed she must be going crazy after all. She could have sworn she just heard a woman's voice in her head. There was hardly a guy in the civilized world who would have refused a blowjob from Jaomi Morantes. But as her moist, natural lips brought Ross closer to the money shot, he couldn't help but wonder about her dental hygiene. Suddenly, Kashuga, the Mount Etna of Beverly Hills, lived up to his reputation, and Jaomi whooped at how high he fired. "God, you should enter that thing in the Olympics," she giggled, spoiling the fourth quarter. Then she rolled over and took a line of blow from the nightstand. Ross joined her. "What a day," he snorted. "The phone's not stopped ringing." "I told you Varanti was no good," she said, white-lining equally as fast. "He'd never have got you this publicity." "What's that?" Ross frowned. "Well, I've been your manager one day, and look what's happened, honey." "But you had nothing to do with it," Ross protested. "Attacking Finwell was my idea. It was just something I did. You didn't arrange it." "But I'm your manager," she restated. "So what? You get credit for everything now? I have a thought and suddenly you own it like you've got psychic powers or some shit?" Jaomi laughed. "Dwayne, don't be childish. That's not it at all." Ross helped himself to a second hit. "Shit," he said, aligning his nostril. "At least Varanti only took my money." "Come on," she said persuasively. "Don't spoil the mood. Just think about all the calls." "Damn right," said Ferratu proudly. "Most of them said I look more like Jason than Jason does. How cool is that?" "Well, I bet you look more real than that stupid body on Zingbid," she said casually. Ross froze. "That what?" "Oh, shit." She held up her hands defensively. "Sorry, I completely forgot about the cutoff." No, fired Ross. "What's this about a body?" "Hey, if this is a test," she answered, laughing, "I just passed." "Jaomi!" Ross shouted, throwing the cocaine salver across the room. "For fuck's sake, just tell me, woman!" But the adult model was used to his tantrums by now, and she refused to take him seriously. "The cutoff's non-negotiable," she said. "Fuck the cutoff!" he shouted. "Just tell me about the fucking body!" "Non-fucking negotiable." Ross jumped out of the bed and walked down the hall to his wife's office, where a PC was always online. Normally, Ross got on with computers about as well as Dracula got on with garlic, but the screen was already on Zingbid, and a little box in the corner read Search. A few fumbled, nervous seconds later, and there it was. Item, Jason Voorhees. Duration, 24 hours. Delivery, buyer to collect in person. Payment method, cash only, to be paid on collection. Description, the body of the world's most famous serial killer. This is 100% genuine. If you've got the money, it's yours. No time wasters. Buyer accepts all risk. Current bid, $18. Condition, poor. "It's a scam," said Jaomi, looking over his shoulder. "There isn't even a photograph." Ross hadn't noticed she'd followed him into the room. He just gazed at the screen with near religious fervor. "I've got to have it," he said. "If you bet on that dog," she warned, "the only thing you'll win is a hole in your pocket." Ross stared back at her. If I don't win, I'm giving you a divorce. All right, she sighed. But if you're determined to go through with this, let's do it properly. What do you mean? He asked, worried she was about to trick him. Jaomi ignored him and looked at the screen, and suddenly she was the one giving the orders. Okay, the current bid's $18. You don't bid. You don't touch a thing. Then 30 seconds from the end, I'll run my bid blocker, and whatever the last bid is, you add $1 and the body's yours. That easy? Asked Ross hopefully. That easy, she confirmed. Ross smiled and took her hand. Then why don't you put on your Jason costume and let me fuck you up the ass? It was time for the rock star to get some sweet hockey mask lurve. Okay, this has been the 13th chapter of Friday the 13th Carnival of Maniacs. And what a strange chapter this has been. Well, at least the ending anyways. Whew. That was hard to even read. Anyways, guys, let me know what you think so far, what you think is coming around the corner, and where all of this is heading. And I'll be back very soon with some more of Friday the 13th Carnival of Maniacs. You know, it looks like in this book, at least right now, what we've got on our hands isn't Jason. It's more of a were-Jason. You know, he only comes alive when the moon's shining on his mama's face. Or would it be a were-Pamela-Jason hybrid? I don't know. Anyways, guys, till next time, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian saying, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.